Hey friends, happy Tuesday, 15th of June. Nice to be with you. How is it that June is already halfway over? I hope we're able to live in the sacrament of the present moment and just let ourselves be right here, right now with our God. I'll give you a reflection. I invite you to click the link and read the readings prayerfully if you haven't done so already, and then turn off the screen. Spend some time with the Lord. 11th week of ordinary time, numbered time. We are just marching through some of the scriptures, learning a little bit more, drawn a little bit deeper into this mystery of God. First reading is from St. Paul's second letter to the Corinthians, and then the gospel is Jesus in Matthew's Gospel, Sermon on the Mount. 2 Corinthians, today and tomorrow, we are going to talk about money and giving money to further the gospel. And so Paul is working wonderfully in this first reading. There's no real mention of a collection, but that's what he's talking about. He's talking about a collection on behalf of the church in Jerusalem. And this was always a part of his ministry, taking up money to help the poor ones of God in Jerusalem and in Judea. For whatever reason, the church in Jerusalem and Judea was poor, and Paul was always very mindful of that. When he's talking about the generosity of those in Macedonia, so that's northern Greece, I believe that he's talking about the church in Philippi, right? So when Paul writes his letter to the Philippians, that's the church in Philippi, and I believe that that's in the northern part of Greece. And he is encouraging his recipients, his listeners in the port city of Corinth. Corinth was pretty wealthy because that was where a lot of trading happened. He's encouraging them to be generous as well. What I'd really direct your attention to is the last couple of lines here, because I think that this is challenging for us as 21st century capitalistic Americans. He's just inviting them to think about Jesus Christ. And he says that Jesus Christ, our Lord Jesus Christ, that for your sake, he became poor, although he was rich, so that by his poverty, you might become rich. I think that this is challenging, right? You know that diocesan priests have not taken a vow of poverty like those in religious communities have done. We try to manage money and live in the world while not being of the world ourselves. We'll get a challenge in the Sermon on the Mount in a couple of days in regards to that. Probably we as Americans think that we will become rich because we are rich, and look at all the great things that we do, and then God will love us, and God will bestow God's blessings upon us, and we will become rich and wealthy. To remember in stark terms that Jesus Christ became poor for our sake, became poor out of love for us. And there are oftentimes so few things that we are more afraid of, and I'm talking to myself here, of a lack of security, a lack of control, and a lack of financial resources. How might we be challenged just by this example of Jesus Christ, who though he was rich, he became poor out of love for us, so that out of his poverty, we might be rich, and obviously not rich in worldly things and financial things, but rich in the spiritual life, rich in meaning and purpose and value, rich on the level of the soul in the way that matters most abundantly. Gospel, continuing the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus, the new lawgiver, so he's saying, Moses taught you this, but I say to you this. And today we have one of the great ones. You've heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy, but I say to you, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. Be like God, who is good and generous and kind towards all. Don't just be like the pagans who greet those who greet them and are nice to those who are nice to them. I don't know that this is a teaching of Jesus that has aged difficultly. I think that this makes sense to us today, just like it did to his listeners then. We may not have enemies, but who is it that we need to pray for? What are the resentments, the hardnesses in our hearts that we need to offer to the Lord? What people, what groups are we struggling with? And it's not, Lord, smite mine enemies, but rather it's, Lord, bless these who I struggle with. Lord, change my heart that I might have a heart of love, that I can be generous, in the language of the gospel, that I may be perfect in love as you, Lord, are perfect in love. You've heard that it was said, love your neighbor, hate your enemies. But I say to you, you shall love your enemies, and you shall pray for those who persecute you. So you can be just like the Father in heaven. Challenging words. It's not going to happen just because of our own effort. It's going to happen God working in us, which is why it's good for us to read those readings prayerfully, turn off the screen, spend some time in prayer, button up against the challenges of our own hearts. Let's let God's grace work on us. Happy Tuesday, friends. God's blessings to you today. You're going to pray for your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. Smash it. Make it happen. God bless.